My brother called the police during my wedding, then told me he did it to test her reaction. I never thought I'd see the day when uniformed officers would crash my wedding reception. The moment I spotted them at the entrance, my stomach flipped, and my wife, Sarah, squeezed my arm so hard it hurt. We were in the middle of hugging friends, accepting congratulations, that newlywed warmth radiating around us. Then someone whispered urgently in my ear, "Alex, the police are here asking for you," and I felt my entire body go cold. I rushed across the lawn in my suit, weaving around tables stacked with half-eaten plates of shrimp and sliced fruit. Guests all turning toward the commotion. My father, Robert, had this stunned look on his face, and my mother, Linda, was pale as a sheet. My sister-in-law kept shaking her head in disbelief. When I reached the officers, I forced a polite smile, trying to seem calm, but my voice trembled anyway. Hi, I'm Alex Benson. Did someone call you?" One of the officers looked at his notepad and nodded. "We got a complaint about suspicious activity and possible threats at this location," he said, almost apologetically. Like even he didn't believe it. "Can you confirm everything's all right here?" I told him. "We're just having a wedding, for God's sake," and I heard a tremor in my own words. Meanwhile, Sarah joined me, her face tense with worry, as if any second we might be carted off. In the corner of my vision, I noticed my brother Kevin standing near one of the decorative arches, arms folded, wearing that brooding expression I'd come to know too well. And in that second, I knew it was Kevin's doing. My mind couldn't grasp all of it yet, but I felt certain no one else in our circle would ever do something so bizarre. The police insisted on taking a quick look around, verifying we weren't harboring some dangerous situation. Guests parted ways to let them pass, some peering anxiously, others whispering rumors about a crazy ex or an angry neighbor. It was humiliating, but what could I do? The entire scene felt like a slow-motion car crash, unbelievably painful and out of control. When I finally spotted Kevin up close, he just gave me a shrug that sent my blood pressure soaring. I darted a glance at Sarah, unsure whether to keep standing with her or confront my brother immediately. She gently let go of my arm and mouthed, "Go!" So I moved toward Kevin, hoping I could handle whatever nonsense he'd unleash. We ended up off to the side, near a little clump of rose bushes, hidden from most of the guests. "What the hell did you do, Kevin?" I hissed. He raised his palms as if to say, "Easy there, calm down," he began, quiet and matter-of-fact. "I made a call to see how Sarah would react under pressure. I thought it was important to get a glimpse of her true character before," and he waved a hand around, "before you tied yourself down for life with someone you barely know." For a few seconds, I literally couldn't get words out. My heart was pounding so loudly that I thought I might faint. Kevin was always a bit edgy. Our parents joked about him being the wild one since childhood. But I never, in my worst nightmares, expected he'd sabotage my wedding day. "You did what?" I managed to say, choking on each syllable. He acted like it was no big deal, leaning against the fence, eyes steady. "Just a quick phone call. I told the cops there might be a situation here, so they'd swing by. I wanted to see if your new wife would stand by you or freak out and blame you. You know, a stress test. Better to find out now than later, right?" The fury that erupted inside me was instant. My hands curled into fists, but I forced them to remain at my sides. "You ruined the best day of my life," I muttered, voice shaking. "You realize that?" Kevin rolled his eyes. "Stop being so dramatic, Alex. The day isn't ruined. If she can't handle a little adversity, maybe this marriage would have crumbled anyway." I couldn't bear to keep listening. I spun on my heel, marched back toward the main area where Sarah was comforting her bridesmaids who looked rattled. A cluster of my aunts and uncles were talking to the officers, telling them we must have a misunderstanding. Everyone around me was in a half panic. The police were polite enough, but insisted on gathering a bit of information. My father seemed absolutely ready to throttle someone. He'd known Kevin had issues, but never to the point of calling in a phony threat. Mom was at my side in tears, asking over and over who would do such a thing. I just shook my head, not quite able to say, "It was Kevin." My brain was stuck in a nightmarish loop, repeating the same surreal thought. My own brother sabotaged my wedding. Eventually, after a few minutes of awkward tension, the officers decided there was nothing amiss and left, but the damage was done. A handful of guests, unsettled, said their goodbyes and drove away early. Some tried to keep the party going, bless them, but the spark was gone. The entire atmosphere felt poisoned. Sarah's eyes were wet, and her mother was hugging her tight, whispering something like, "Don't let this spoil your happiness." I tried to salvage the wedding reception, encouraging the DJ to keep playing music, but half the guests had retreated to corners, exchanging concerned looks. I overheard one cousin say to another, "I can't believe someone would do that. That's crazy." I walked over to Sarah, feeling guilt gnawing at me. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and promise everything would be okay, but I could sense she was trembling. She looked up at me with this heartbreaking mixture of sorrow and determination. "It's Kevin, isn't it?" she asked softly. I nodded, swallowing hard, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. She just gave me a tearful half-smile, trying to be strong. I knew in that moment I'd never forgive Kevin for doing this to her, stealing what should have been her fairy tale wedding day. Still, I kept telling myself to hold it together. We had guests. We couldn't just abandon them, no matter how ruined the mood was. The next couple of hours were a blur. We cut the cake, took a few forced, happy photos. Everyone pretended things were fine. Some people poured extra champagne, maybe trying to lighten the tension, but the ghost of that police visit haunted the yard like a cloud we couldn't disperse. Eventually, we said our goodbyes, loaded up into a rental car, and departed for the hotel where we were supposed to spend our first night as newlyweds. Sarah was silent most of the drive, staring at the window passing by. I tried to hold her hand on the seat between us. Her fingers were cold. I could feel her heart break so tangibly. When we reached our suite, I saw the staff had left rose petals on the bed, a bottle of sparkling wine, all those thoughtful touches. Under normal circumstances, we would have been floating on love-dazed excitement. Instead, Sarah perched on the edge of the bed, gazing down at those roses with tears streaking her cheeks. "How are you feeling?" I asked, hesitant. She let out a laugh that turned into a sob. "Honestly, I'm terrified. I'm sad. I'm furious. But above all, I'm wondering how your brother could do this to you, to me, to both of us. On our wedding day." She buried her face in her hands. I knelt beside her, stroking her hair, trying to form words of comfort that didn't sound meaningless. Finally, I said something like, "I don't know if I'll ever speak to him again. You didn't deserve this. None of us did." Later that night, as we lay in bed, neither of us really slept. We stared at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying nonstop. Occasionally, one of us would mutter a question like, "What are we going to tell people?" Or, "Are my parents okay?" I'd never felt so outraged and helpless all at once. In a single day, my own brother had turned what should have been the happiest occasion of my life into a fiasco. If his plan was to test Sarah, then sure, in a twisted way, she passed with flying colors. She hadn't run off. She hadn't blamed me, but that didn't erase the harm he'd done or the humiliation we'd experienced. The next morning, I woke to a text on my phone, and I recognized Kevin's number. The message read, "Hey, sorry that things got messy, but I did it for your own good. Now you see how Sarah handles big surprises. You should be glad I weeded out any possible trouble. She seems fine, though, so maybe everything's cool, right?" I stared at the screen, speechless. He'd basically confirmed his experiment and showed no remorse. Just this tone of self-righteousness, as if I should be thanking him. My fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. Sarah, still in bed, noticed my expression and asked if it was Kevin. When I told her, she sighed. "Don't respond. We can't give him the satisfaction, at least not yet." Those following days were rough. We'd scheduled a 2-week honeymoon in a cabin near the mountains, but now we both felt this lingering depression. It was hard to jump into honeymoon mode when the wedding day fiasco still weighed on us. My parents called me daily, sounding distressed. My father apologized over and over, saying he never saw it coming. My mother cried, asking why Kevin would do such a mean-spirited thing. And I told them the same thing I told Sarah. He claims it was a test. He wanted to watch Sarah's reaction to a high-pressure scenario. Dad was so angry he started talking about punching Kevin or cutting him off completely. Mom tried to defend Kevin in that motherly way. "He probably just wanted to protect you," in his twisted mind, but it didn't soothe my rage. Meanwhile, Sarah's parents were also in shock. Her father even considered filing a formal complaint with the police for a false report. Though in the end, we decided it wouldn't bring closure. We did go on our honeymoon, though it was more subdued than planned. We spent time in nature, went on hikes. I'd catch Sarah quietly crying sometimes, especially when she thought I wasn't looking. It broke my heart. I kept telling her I was so sorry this happened, that I felt responsible, which only made her cry more because she insisted it wasn't my fault. "You can't control your brother," she would say, pressing her hand over mine. I wish he hadn't done it. "But don't you dare blame yourself for his insanity?" Even so, the cloud hovered over us, and it wasn't the dreamy, carefree vacation we'd hoped for. When we got back, word had spread among friends and extended family. People texted us or posted on social media, "Hey, we heard something happened at your wedding with the police showing up." A few had seen photos or short clips from guests who filmed the moment the officers arrived. I didn't want to relive it, but it was everywhere. We tried to keep calm and carry on, focusing on the fact that we were now married and living together, starting our life as a couple. But so many times, a friend or coworker would sidle up to me, curiosity shining in their eyes. "Dude, what was with that 911 call at your wedding?" And I'd feel a flush of embarrassment as I tried to explain. I felt like a spectacle. Eventually, I confronted Kevin by phone. I needed to talk to him directly, though I dreaded it. Sarah was in the living room, while I paced back and forth in the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. When Kevin picked up, he sounded weirdly casual, like we were about to discuss the weather. Alex, hey man, you doing okay? I nearly choked on my anger. No, Kevin, I'm not doing okay. You called the cops on my wedding day and turned it into a circus. You made me and Sarah look like fools in front of everyone we love, and you're acting like this was some favor. What's wrong with you? I waited, heart racing. After a pause, he sighed heavily. Look, I know it got out of hand, but my intentions were good. I've seen you jump into relationships without thinking things through. You're always the trusting type. I figured if Sarah was easily spooked, or if she tried to pin blame on you, you'd see her true colors, but she didn't. She stuck around, she defended you, so you should be grateful in a way. I nearly broke the phone in my grip. Grateful, I hissed, for traumatizing my wife and humiliating us? Kevin insisted. Better to know you can trust her than find out later, right? The conversation ended with me calling him sick and telling him not to speak to me for a while. He tried to claim I was too emotional, that one day I'd look back and understand. I hung up before he could say another word. That night, I told Sarah about the conversation, and she shook her head in disbelief. That's borderline sociopathic, she said. He's your brother, but he doesn't seem to care about your feelings at all. My parents urged me to meet Kevin in person to see if we could come to some resolution. Sarah was strongly against it, but she left it up to me. My dad arranged a dinner at a local restaurant, but as soon as Kevin walked in, I felt my blood pressure spike. He sat down, gave me a nod like nothing major had happened. My mom tried to open the discussion gently. Kevin, can you please explain how you thought that phone call wouldn't destroy Alex and Sarah's wedding? Kevin shrugged, focusing on his glass of water. I thought the wedding would bounce back, he said, almost offended that we were so upset. It was just a quick scare. Nobody got hurt. My father slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware, and snarled, Nobody got hurt! You traumatized everyone! Kevin just said, They should be glad it's behind them. Now Alex doesn't have to worry he's marrying someone who can't handle adversity? I saw tears forming in my mother's eyes. She stared at Kevin like she didn't recognize him. But that was the thing. Kevin had always been a rebel, always testing boundaries, just never so destructively. After a few minutes of tense back and forth, I stood up and said, I can't do this. I'm done. My father asked me to wait, but I strode out. Kevin didn't even stand up. As I left, I heard him mutter something about me overreacting. I walked outside, took a few calming breaths in the parking lot, and called Sarah. She asked if I was okay, and I laughed bitterly. Yeah, I'm fine, just done with him. We both knew we might be done with him for a very long time. Life after that was a slow process of trying to heal. Sarah and I got back to our routines, going to work, grocery shopping, binging shows on weekends, visiting her parents, occasionally seeing my parents when Kevin wasn't around. We dreaded family get-togethers, anxious he might show up uninvited. On top of that, we still felt robbed of a real wedding experience. We had photos, but so many of them showed forced smiles or guests looking tense in the background. The wedding video captured the early part of the day, which was beautiful, but it also included a shot of the police arriving. Even the parts that were perfect felt tainted by that memory. Kevin tried sending me texts off and on, links to stories about gold diggers, articles claiming half of all marriages fail, random conspiracy-like claims about how you have to test loyalty. I ignored them. Sometimes he'd write these half-apology notes. Sorry you got upset, but I was just making sure you weren't walking into a trap. It was never a genuine, I'm sorry for what I did. Sarah encouraged me to block his number, which I eventually did. My parents were heartbroken, but they respected my decision. They told me Kevin kept insisting he'd done nothing truly wrong and that I was the one being unreasonable. My father wanted to punch him. My mother was torn. I tried to tune it out for my own mental health. Meanwhile, Sarah and I found a little rental house to move into while we saved for a place to buy. We focused on each other, trying to reclaim some sense of marital bliss. Some nights, though, we'd end up talking about the wedding and get angry or sad all over again. It was like an open wound that wouldn't quite heal. Maybe we should plan a second ceremony, Sarah mused once. Just a small vow renewal with close friends. Something to erase the bad memory. I liked the idea in theory, but I was also worried Kevin might find a way to sabotage it again. Even the thought of that made me shiver. As we edged closer to a year of marriage, the shock dulled a bit, replaced by a quiet resentment. Our friends still brought up the wedding fiasco from time to time, often with sympathetic jokes like, at least you have a wedding story no one can top. I forced a chuckle, but I hated that it was overshadowing everything else about that day. One bright side was seeing how supportive many people were. Sarah's best friend, Julia, took us out to dinner a couple of times, refusing to let us brood. She said, that day was about your love, not Kevin's stupidity. Don't let him overshadow what matters. Easier said than done. But we tried. My cousin Mark, who'd come from out of state for the wedding, apologized that his strongest memory of the trip was the police fiasco. He joked that now he had a crazy wedding story to share, though he wished it hadn't been ours. Sometimes I'd catch myself reflecting on childhood memories, trying to pinpoint where Kevin's trust issues originated. We'd grown up in a middle-class neighborhood, typical suburban life. He'd always been a bit rebellious, but not malicious. In high school, he got into some trouble, shoplifting a couple times, skipping class, but mostly grew out of it. As adults, we drifted apart because our personalities clashed. I went to college and law school, got a stable job at a local firm, tried to keep the family proud. Kevin hopped between gigs, eventually settled on a freelance hustle that he claimed was more authentic. Occasionally, he'd rail about how society was fake, how you couldn't trust anybody. I never realized he'd carry that cynicism to such an extreme that he'd call the cops on his own family event. Over time, I shared the story with a close friend who was a therapist. Not in a formal session, just over coffee. He said it sounded like Kevin's behavior might stem from deep-seated paranoia or fear of betrayal, but that doesn't excuse it, he added quickly. It just might help you understand it wasn't about you personally. I nodded, though it still stung. Kevin attacked the one day that should have belonged to me and Sarah, and he felt justified. Hard not to take that personally. We pressed on with our lives, eventually building a sense of normalcy. Sarah and I attended a couples retreat about a year into our marriage, just a fun weekend workshop. They asked participants to share wedding stories as an icebreaker. Everyone else had sweet or funny tales about mishaps with the cake or last-minute changes to the venue. When it was our turn, Sarah and I hesitated. Finally, she said, "Let's just say it involved a police car and my brother-in-law," and the group gasped. We kept the details short, but it was enough for them to understand it had been a traumatic event. We tried to lighten it with a self-deprecating joke, but I saw the pity in their eyes. My parents, still devastated by the family rift, made occasional attempts to get Kevin and me in the same room. I refused unless I heard real remorse from him. As far as I knew, he was doubling down, telling them I needed to grow up and get over it. Dad privately told me he was at his wit's end with Kevin's stubbornness. Mom said Kevin was convinced I'd eventually see the wisdom of his test. Sarah joked we must be living in the twilight zone, because what rational person would believe the bride and groom should be happy about a wedding day meltdown? 2 years passed, we found a small house we liked, put in an offer, and moved. Sarah decorated the place with a cheerful flair, determined to create an environment of love and comfort. We rarely spoke of Kevin, though he lingered in the background of my thoughts. Sometimes I felt pangs of guilt, knowing my parents longed for a big, happy family. But every time I considered reaching out, I'd remember the humiliation on Sarah's face, the tears in her eyes as the police strolled into our reception. The horror and heartbreak of that memory kept me resolute. How could I let him near us without any real accountability? Still, a small piece of me missed him. Kevin and I shared a history. We had jokes and references no one else understood, and occasionally I'd see or hear something that reminded me of our younger days, like an old TV show we used to watch. That nostalgic pang made me wonder if reconciliation was possible. But then I'd recall his dismissive attitude at the restaurant, how he downplayed the devastation he caused, and the thought of bridging that gap felt impossible. Sarah and I started planning a delayed honeymoon in Hawaii, telling ourselves it would be a do-over for the trip that got overshadowed by gloom the first time. A friend recommended a wonderful island resort, so we booked it. Right around that time, Kevin texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, heard you might be traveling soon. Can we talk?" My chest tightened. I showed the message to Sarah, who just gave me a wary look. I replied, "About what?" And he answered, "I'd like to bury the hatchet." That alone stirred a flurry of mixed feelings: anger, hope, skepticism, fear. In the end, I suggested we talk on the phone first. He agreed, and so one evening, I found myself pacing in my living room with the phone to my ear once again. Kevin's voice was subdued. He said he was sorry for how things ended, but still insisted he never meant to cause so much chaos. I probed him. "Do you actually see that calling the police was a vile thing to do?" He hesitated, then said, "I see now that it hurt you both." Not exactly the admission of guilt I'd hoped for, but it was something. He said he realized he might have gone overboard, that maybe I needed an apology. I pressed further. "So you regret it?" He answered, "I regret the result, but not the intention. I just wanted to protect you." That line made me grit my teeth. At this point, I realized his perspective hadn't shifted. He still believed he was some sort of guardian figure, ignoring the fact that I'm a grown man. After a tense silence, he muttered, "Anyway, I'd like a chance to start fresh. Maybe meet for coffee or something." I told him I'd think about it. I was shaking by the time we ended the call because it all felt so half-hearted. When I reported the conversation to Sarah, she listened calmly, then asked, "Do you feel ready to see him in person?" I admitted I was torn. A piece of me yearned for closure, but I doubted I'd get it. She said, "If you meet him, do it for you, not because he's pressuring you, and protect your own boundaries. If he starts justifying himself, walk away." Ultimately, I decided to hold off. We had our Hawaii trip coming up. The last thing I wanted was to add stress before a vacation we'd waited years to enjoy. I told Kevin maybe after we got back we could arrange something. He just said, sure, and left it at that. Hawaii turned out to be the romantic getaway we needed. Sunset walks on the beach, lush forests, snorkeling among bright fish. For the first time in ages, Sarah and I didn't think about Kevin. We let ourselves just be a normal, happy couple. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 2 years. We even had a little vow renewal on the sand. Just the two of us. That might sound cheesy, but it was healing. Stepping barefoot on the shore, reciting words of love with the ocean waves as witness. When we got back home, the wedding fiasco didn't feel as raw. It was still a horrible memory, but one overshadowed by new, better memories. Kevin messaged me again a couple of months later, asking if I was ready to meet. This time, I felt calmer, more grounded. I suggested a coffee shop near my office. Sarah had no interest in being there, so it was just me walking in, spotting Kevin at a corner table. He stood when he saw me, looked almost normal. We made awkward small talk. How's life? How's work? That sort of thing. Then I cut to the chase. So, what do you want from me? Kevin fiddled with his coffee mug, took a breath. I'm sick of us not speaking, he said. I never meant to become a pariah. I stared, waiting for him to continue. Finally, he forced out, I am sorry for the pain I caused. He said it quietly, but it seemed genuine. I held my breath, waiting for a but. It never came. I asked, do you still think you did the right thing in principle? He looked down, gave a small shrug. I think I made a huge mistake in how I handled it. If I was worried about you, I should have talked to you instead of staging that call. I see that now, and I'm sorry. I felt a strange swirl of relief, confusion, and anger. Relief that he was showing a hint of humility. Confusion because it was so late. He could have said this ages ago. Anger that I had to wait so long for these words. I told him, in a measured tone, I accept your apology, but that doesn't fix what happened. Sarah and I lost something we can't get back. That day was supposed to be special. You turned it into a nightmare, Kevin nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I get that, he said. I hope you can forgive me someday. We talked a bit longer. He asked about Sarah, and I told him she was good but not ready to see him. He said he understood. He admitted he'd been going through some rough times emotionally, that he'd convinced himself I was blind to potential betrayal. It was twisted logic, but at least he was owning up to it. After about an hour, I shook his hand, uncertain what it meant for the future. Driving home, I felt emotionally drained, but also lighter, as if a giant stone had shifted off my chest. Was it closure, or just another beginning of a complicated healing process? When I told Sarah about the meeting, she seemed glad he'd apologized, but stayed firm that she wasn't ready to play happy family with him. He stole something precious from us, she said. I can't just forget, I nodded, telling her I'd never force her to. She thanked me for understanding. Over time, Kevin and I had a few more texts, mostly casual. He asked if we could do a family barbecue, but I said I wasn't sure Sarah would be comfortable. He took that pretty quietly, said he'd wait. Some months later, we had a small get-together at my parents' house while Kevin was out of town, and it felt weirdly normal again, as if life had moved forward. But we all knew the specter of that wedding day still haunted the family dynamic. 3 years have passed since that dreadful police appearance, and I'm here telling this story as honestly as I can. Sarah and I are strong, planning for kids, maybe in another year or two. My parents see Kevin occasionally, and they don't bring him up much unless I ask. I've let go of the raw hatred, but I'm still not entirely sure if I truly trust him again. Maybe that's something that can be rebuilt very slowly, maybe not. The biggest lesson I took from it all was how easily one person's paranoia can detonate a perfect moment in someone else's life, and it hurts even more when that person is your own sibling. I wish I could tie this up neatly and say we made total peace, that the four of us now share Sunday dinners like nothing happened. But real life doesn't always yield to such tidy resolutions. Sometimes the best you can do is learn to coexist with the pain. Find your happiness anyway, and hope that someday real forgiveness might be possible. Sarah and I plan to hold a vow renewal ceremony in the future, maybe on our 5th anniversary. Something small, a beach trip with a few close friends. We haven't decided yet if Kevin will be invited. We both want that day to be purely about celebrating the love we've built. Free of drama or tests, we deserve it after what we endured. I still get asked about the wedding fiasco. Some people think it's so outrageous. It's almost funny, but only from the outside. When I retell it in a lighter tone, I sometimes manage a laugh. Oh yeah, my brother called the cops on my wedding to see if my bride was good under pressure, I say, wryly. People's jaws drop. They can't imagine it really happened, but it did, and it left a deep scar I'm only beginning to heal. Sarah stands by me, unwavering. And that's the thing Kevin unwittingly proved. We're unbreakable together. If our marriage could survive that day, I think it can survive just about anything. That's the small silver lining in this otherwise messed up story. So that's how it stands. Kevin and I share a complicated bond, overshadowed by the memory of a phone call that forever tarnished what should have been a flawless day, yet life goes on. Sarah and I have built something strong and beautiful in spite of it all, and if nothing else, we'll never take our relationship for granted. I guess that's the final takeaway. Sometimes you find out how resilient your love is through challenges you never asked for. In our case, that challenge took the form of two baffled police officers showing up just as we were clinking champagne glasses, and yet here we are, still side by side. I think that speaks volumes about what real partnership means.